Welcome everyone to our webinar today, all around comms and the customer journey. I'll be your host. My name's Lear and I'm the Managing Director here at Ambitious. And my background is agency. I've worked in agency for about 25 years, a range of different global and UK-based agencies supporting on communications and reputation management. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Joe Wright, who's our Strategy and Insights Director at Ambitious, and also Sean Harris, who is Head of Digital at Digital NRG. So if I just hand over to you both just to give a little bit of an intro. Sean.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, as I said, I'm Sean. I'm Head of Digital at NRG. So we're a Bristol-based agency, in case you've not come across us before. Work closely with Ambitious. My background, I say 15 years, it's probably more, 15, 16 years in digital marketing as a whole range of in-house roles, agency roles, and e-com. So real broad mix. And everything in between at the moment. So Head of Digital at NRG, we're looking after 300 plus clients across a whole different range of industries, from your kind of one-man bands all the way up to the world's largest TV manufacturer, and everything in between. So yeah, really kind of broad, diverse knowledge. Jack of all trades, if you like, master of none, perhaps.
Thank you, Sean. And Joe.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for joining. I'm Joe. I'm Director of Strategy Insights at Ambitious, and my job is to support clients in being able to tell their stories, and that's across multiple different channels, some of which we'll be talking about today. I come from an agency background as well, always working in strategic comms, with a specialism in online reputation management. And at Ambitious, I specialize in, maybe like Sean, a couple of different things, but I help run up our digital offer as well as our insights offer. And a big role for me over the past kind of 6 months has been spearheading our GEO and AI search offer, something that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So, with all these new channels, it's just about helping our clients tell their stories in different and new places.
Great, thank you. So, comms and the customer journey. We know there is a huge amount of disruption at the moment, and we wanted to make sure we covered off 3 key areas today in this conversation. So we'll probably run the webinar for about in terms of the discussion between us for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open up to questions. I know many of you have submitted questions already, so thank you for that. And some of that's been incorporated into the conversation, and there'll be a chance to also ask further questions after the 30-minute mark as well. So the key topics we wanted to cover was obviously and how search is changing, and how traditional PR supports new behaviors and thinking about trust, authority, and visibility. Then also the traditional marketing sales funnel and its evolution, and where obviously communications fits into this and the importance of that. And then finally, we'll look a bit more at the kind of tailoring your message for the different purposes, and audience type and personas. So I think, everyone who's probably on this call are marketeers, comms professionals, facing information overload. There's shrinking trust, and we know that the buyer, the path to purchase looks very different for every individual. So communications is absolutely core to this and can really cut through. And it's not just constant, just that support function. It's got to be strategic. It's got to be that strategic engine that supports visibility, credibility, and conversion. So I think when it comes to discoverability for business, it's really changing. Audiences, we know, are not just going to Google to research, to find the answers, to make decisions anymore. So we know AI is the big buzzword. It's been booming over the last few years. And this is obviously really important in the customer journey because it impacts how your brand can be seen. So I think if I throw the first question out to you, Sean, AI search is a massive topic. It's threatened everything. Traditional SEO has been thrown up in the air. Can you talk a bit about why it's causing so much disruption?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it starts, I suppose, with the fact that there is so much noise out there about it. It's one of those, everybody's bombarded with AI left, right, and center. It's in new tools. It's all over the place. So it's obviously kind of front and center of everyone's mind. In terms of how people are searching, and as you say, traditionally, you may have gone on Google, searched through several different listings to try and find the information that you needed. Whereas now we're finding more and more people, I know I do it myself, I'm sure others on the call do, is you jump straight to your Gemini app or your ChatGPT app, and you let Gemini do the hard work for you and go and crawl through all that data Now, the difference, I suppose, there is how does that affect traditional SEO and what we've done before? The responses and things that the engines are looking for are the same but slightly different to what we've done previously. So we're looking very much question and answer. I need a response to that question. We're looking at scanning data. We talked about it in two different elements. You've got the actual content itself. So we need to know that, yes, you can talk about what we're asking or the AI engine's asking. We're also then looking at the AI engines are looking at, do you have the authority to talk about that? And so does your authority allow you to answer that question? And this, I then think, we're linked into that more traditional media, which has always happened, that link building piece of creating articles and trying to get links back, which is historically how we'd have done that through a more SEO focused but traditional path. But often in the past, the quality of the article, let's say, or the positioning of that link was probably less important than the authority that the site had. So you'll find lots of people with loads of links, and they've all come from fairly good sites, but the actual content and the authority piece around that, it doesn't really support the link. It's maybe got some keywords in, but the link was the important piece. We're now seeing a complete flip, and I'll give you a real example of that. We're looking currently just doing an audit for a client or potential client that's a manufacturer of caravans. So pretty broad. One of the things they want to look at is they've got a model that is lightweight for people with EVs and small vehicles. So how can that be discovered online? So if we look at the moment of how can I discover that, and I go to the Gemini or ChatGPT, we discovered that actually we're getting listings. So I've got 4 different listings. When I say search for what's the best lightweight caravan, 4 different listings, 4 different manufacturers. None of the data or none of the links are coming directly from the manufacturer's site. We're coming from Practical Caravan. We're coming from all those kind of publications where they've written about it and they've got the authority to write about it. And so that's a real shift from traditional SEO. Whereas maybe if you had enough links, we could bump up that manufacturer's site. Now we're sort of saying, actually, we don't just need that. We need to know that you have the authority to talk about that piece. So I would say that's the big shift.
No, that's really helpful, I think, to set the scene. And what then is the impact for a business's website then, if the authority is coming through publications, the comms, the content out there, what impact is that having on a business's website?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a question we get asked a lot at the moment. Do I still need the website? Yeah, I think, it depends. It very much depends on, I think everyone's always going to need their site, because at the end of the day, that is the foundation of where your technical information, your real depth of product knowledge comes from. Product service knowledge, we'll refer to them as the same. There's a big split whether you're an e-com business versus a lead gen business. There's a huge push at the moment in e-com for agentic search and agentic buying agents, basically from ChatGPT or Gemini, buying directly on site. So in which place it still uses your site, it uses all the structure, it uses all the information. All it's doing is pulling that out and putting it into ChatGPT, for example. Likewise with lead gen, I think the AI bit is really just serves as that discoverability piece. Without your site, you don't really have any discoverability, and it can't crawl your site. But I think that it then comes into the things that are on your site are more important. Things like speed becomes really, really important, because if the engines can't quickly crawl your site, it's not going to return that result. Things like the schema markup and the code markup and the layout and structure of your site becomes even more important, because again, that understanding piece. So just because you've got the information there, the engines need to be able to understand it in a timely fashion and deliver it back to you. So yeah, it's still really, really important.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere, but you might have to change it a little bit.
No, absolutely. No, that's really helpful, I think. And Joe, over to you. I think one of the big concerns for many brands is where they'll appear. They haven't, I think people feel really out of control at the moment. It's moving so fast, AI search, and there seems to be, less control for businesses over what the LLMs are going to show. How can you combat this, and what would be your advice on that?
Yeah, ultimately, there's a lot of similarities between the SEO world and the GEO world, as Sean's already kind of touched on. It's about nuanced changes and really understanding what these AI platforms are looking for. But also, look, I understand the kind of concern out there for marketeers. It is a whole new world at the same time. before the SEO world grew up around Google and there was an understanding, you'd have algorithm updates, despite how confusing they could potentially be at certain points. You'd have your page one and that would be your holy grail. And there would be things that you'd expect on that page one, maybe a Wikipedia listing at the top, Google business profile. There'd be certain key things that you could become accustomed to and try and influence the results. With GEO and AI search now, there's 5 different prominent LLMs that are being pulled from. Everyone's using different ones. Things are changing all the time. I think I was thinking back when I was preparing for this webinar. I think I talked about on our last webinar quite a lot about how Reddit is a massively influential platform now. And, Google's deal with Reddit to scrape data and ChatGPT, having it as one of the most prominent sources. Well, since then, that's completely changed. I think Reddit's prominence on AI search has dropped by 82% last year. So it's been completely wiped in terms of its prominence. So there's a lot of changes. However, the thing that you can try and gain some clarity over when thinking about LLMs is just really going back to basics and fundamentals. AI is an answer engine. It's pulling from lots of different sources and citations, but what it's doing is sort of level the playing field. No more can we rely on, some dodgy link building strategy and suddenly you're on page one. It's a lot more, as Sean says, about the authority that you're building on your site. And the good thing is that AI is a lot smarter than Google. It can identify and kind of separate what it's seeing is people trying to kind of influence it unfairly. They can go back to basics. Is your company trusted by reputable authority sources such as media coverage? Tick. Are you displaying your information really clearly in a formulaic way that AI thinks the customer would want to see when it's on your site? These basic fundamentals, nailing them, there's a lot of other technical stuff that you can get into and a lot of noise out there, but doing those fundamentals well, AI is smart enough to understand and champion sites that are doing those fundamentals. And we're going to talk about that a bit more today, about how you can use some of these grounding theories to ensure that your site is appearing where it should be.
So traditional PR, it feels like at the moment, is back in favor, particularly when it comes to AI and the search engines. I think you both alluded to that. Can you talk a bit more about what form that takes and why that's so important?
Yeah, I mean, we're ecstatic. It's been great. It's been great for the PR industry, I think, and ultimately for our clients. Media coverage has always been super important for brand awareness, reputation building. It's also traditionally been important for SEO, but the key change is the citations that the LLMs are pulling from. So there's lots of different stats out there. I've seen some really high statistics in terms of the amount of citations that are being pulled from traditional media. I think up to 82% Muckrack reference, which is a social listening and media monitoring tool. I think it probably sits somewhere between the 60 and 80%, but that's fluctuated. But these are really significant numbers if you think about, the customer, especially going for more complex purchases. If they are using AI now above Google, and 60 to 80% of the citations that they're seeing to make that purchasing decision are coming from traditional media sources, trade media, that means Caravan Weekly, as Sean was talking about before, it's gone from being maybe, your enthusiasts reading it to anyone who's looking to buy a caravan. That Caravan Weekly article and the journalist that has written that is having a direct influence then on that purchasing decision. So ultimately, media coverage has been boosted from that perspective when it comes to a digital space. The other interesting thing is the volume of media coverage. So if you have multiple different media sources, say you put out a press release, you get 2 pieces of coverage. They're finding now that it's up to 300% more likely to be returned if you have, say, 10 pieces of coverage off that same press release in different types of publications.
Got you.
AI is identifying, again, it's smart. It's built to be smart. It sees, okay, there's Caravan Weekly, but there's also Caravan World and Caravan Bi-Weekly. I don't know all the caravan platforms, but it's showing that the doubling down of that information. If you're getting stats out there and they're being reported across sources, again, it's exponentially increasing the likelihood that your business or that fact that you've put in is going to be cited, and it's going to help you in the journey to prominence.
Is there, when it comes to, sorry, Sean, did you want to say something quickly before we go?
I was just going to quickly say, yeah, I mean, that, as you just say, it's exactly what we've seen also, and so those results you get often have multiple citations, so you can see those straight away. They're straight in there. But also offers the bit, I suppose, that we're seeing is a real good opportunity for exactly that, is making sure that you're connecting all that together. Things like, lots of people already have all those things out there, but they're really disjointed, and using things like schema within the page. So author schema is a massive thing at the moment. Somebody with a medical background, for example, we're looking at adding medical schema and things like that then links them from their association. So they might be a a member of an association body, a well-regarded body. Linking all that back to the content that's being pushed out there is also just connecting the dots, and helps those LLMs. Actually, this person has the authority because they're also this person, and they're also this person on LinkedIn, and this person over here. So you can always garner some of your own citations just by using your own presence as well. But yeah, echo what Joe says there. We've seen exactly the same.
Right. And I think I want to move on in a moment to talk about the tools, because I'm sure people will be wondering how we can monitor this. But before we do that, there were a couple of questions that came through prior to the webinar beginning around paid advertorials and promoter docs, etc. It sounds like they don't have as much weight, but I'd be interested to understand your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I've got a stat for this actually, what I made earlier. But according to the same study from Muckrack, so 94% are coming from non-paid sources in terms of citations, which is leaving about a 6% gap for those paid citations. Now, again, research has been done, but nothing is 100% conclusive. If you are running a wider campaign, you're getting lots of earned media coverage, you're replaying that for your own channels, your own social media channels, and then there's some paid support potentially on the same thing. I don't think it's beyond the realm to think that AI search would consider that, again, the kind of mass of information to make its decision on that citation. But overall, no is the answer, really.
Yeah.
Most of the time is not looking at paid sources, because ultimately they want to give people the most authentic answers.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you think there's a difference between, it sounds like, the balance between sort of thought leadership, expert commentary versus product and service led is all important, really? Is that fair to say there isn't a weighting towards one or the other?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all down to the prompt. Obviously, if people are going for more research-led prompts and potentially before they make a buying decision, they might make that decision in a month's time. They're doing their research before.
Yeah.
Thought leadership in that respect is super important. But again, there's an AI funnel, there's a funnel for everything. But when you're coming close to that purchasing decisions, yeah, that's when that more product-led, messaging is also really key.
So it's all about thinking about the customer journey is still important to understand those different points and what people need, and ensuring you're developing the right content and the right information at those different stages.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of kind of the monitoring, sorry, Sean.
No, sorry, I was going to say, I think that's quite a big difference in what we're seeing with those content versus how SEO's happened before as well. Those, as you say, fitting that content into that journey, whereas we see lots of historic blogs about things you might like to do in Cornwall, for example, for somebody selling a holiday, but it's not actually directly relevant to their product, their offering. It's kind of semantic around the edges. And I think as we're thinking about AI and AI content, understanding where it fits into that journey is something that we certainly are seeing as a really important thing at the moment.
Brilliant. And we'll come on a little bit more to focus on that in a moment. Just sort of finally on the AI reporting side, or the monitoring and visibility, I know it's still in its infancy, nothing's perfect yet, but what tools are out there, and what are the best ways to do that and to provide that insight and understanding?
So talking with Sean, ourselves at Ambitious and Digital NRG, we work closely on projects, and we actually use both the same AI monitoring tools. We use SEMrush's solution. All of these tools, as you say, are in their infancy. It's a recent development from SEMrush. They're all similar in terms of their foundational, how they pull the information. However, it's not a perfect science, because ultimately, a lot of the time, as everyone knows, using these tools, you're having a conversation with them. sometimes those conversations can go on for weeks potentially if you're making a really difficult purchasing decision, for example. So you're coming back to it and you're adding more elements. So although it's good at picking up what the initial prompts are and the kind of broad strokes, some of the nuance isn't quite there yet, as you maybe would have seen when you're doing more SEO research. However, look, these tools are the best we've got. They're the market leaders, and they're only going to get better, and they are getting better. So it's what we need to go off of now. It's our best source of information. And we can do some really interesting things when it comes to that audit phase and showing where you're appearing. It takes a bit of a human lens to work backwards and try and work out the customer journey for yourself to test and learn. But yeah, it's the best we got, and they're getting better all the time.
The other thing I'd add to that is you can see right now what you've already got in terms of what's hitting your site right now via GA4. But a lot of the time at the moment, ChatGPT referrals or Gemini referral will often go in as not set, because it's just lumping it into the general pool that it doesn't know. So interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those little hacks that lots of people don't know, but within GA4, you can go in and you can create a subgroup and define where that traffic's coming from. And then the order in which it appears in the list actually defines whether it's going to show as ChatGPT traffic or not. So there's a few little hacks like that you can do out there to understand what you're getting right now, and also what that really means. Are you getting ChatGPT traffic or Gemini traffic that converts or doesn't, or so you can sort of understand what you've got now, and obviously it's a good point of measuring going forwards as well, how that increases or doesn't.
And then obviously sets the strategy, doesn't it, in terms of what you want to do moving forward. And I think just moving on slightly, it still remains obviously critical that you understand your audience and you're building relationships with them at the different stages of the journey, the customer journey, moving them down the funnel. So I think, Joe, just wanted to understand a bit about insight and the role that plays in understanding audiences, and how can brands translate this into their comms in order to build relationships with leads and to ultimately convert them.
So yeah, insight is the foundation of any strategy that we create at Ambitious. For us, we focus on traditionally 3 key areas. So the audience, so who you're talking to, your competitor set, what other people are saying to that same audience, and the market more in general. So what are the key trends? That could be from policy, from government, from regulation, could be AI, and they all fall into that insights pot that we then use to develop our strategy and get a clear picture of what our clients' needs and therefore what their positioning should be, what the white space is, the areas we need to challenge competitor messaging, for example. Now AI search as well, going back to that, is another key point of insight for us. Where are your competitors appearing? Where are their citations? And how can we adjust or improve our strategy to outrank them ultimately? So it all kind of comes into one picture, and from that we create our campaigns. There's just more channels to consider now, and we need to be more thoughtful and draw more data points when it comes to the insights exercise to be able to do that. And I think that's another reason why, as an industry and as solo marketeers, we need to really understand AI search as well, because if we understand AI search for ourselves, we can also reverse engineer that to understand our competitors' AI search strategy, for example, where they're targeting, where they're trying to appear, because all of these elements of insight need to come into our strategic thinking to be one step ahead ultimately. So that's really how things are changing. But for us, insight as a grounding is always our first port of call before we do anything, and making it as data led as possible, whether that's through media monitoring, social listening, AI search, traditional Google Trends, SEO. All of these factors come into play so we can make data led decisions, and then critically measure the efficacy of those decisions on the other end, so we can benchmark and make sure that we're demonstrating back to our clients and to ourselves that what we're doing is successful, hopefully.
No, and I mean, and obviously personas are really important when you're thinking about the audiences, understanding them, and particularly understanding their intention. I've heard the word intent thrown around a lot, understanding what people are looking for, why, and trying to get into their heads essentially, so you can ensure you're, pushing out the right content to answer those questions. How important is that to the customer journey you take, and the journey you take them on?
Yeah, so intent is, as you say, yeah, it's a word. It's another buzzword, a really important one, just as much as AI search, really. And the two are really tied closely together. So we need to focus on intent. So when we're creating personas, we're looking at kind of the motivations of that individual, the barriers to buying triggers, and their key behaviors. Um, all of these things are tied into the intent. What is the intent of that person when they're going on social media compared to when they're on AI search or when they're reading a media article? Uh, and we need to match our content and comms to that intent, just as you would match to persona key demographics, for example. But no more is it worth just having our persona is female between 20 and 30 with these key characteristics. That's too basic and foundational at this stage. There are some really incredible audience tools. Some of them are free as well. Spark Toro is one that we use a lot. I feel like I'm being slightly blinded here. Spark Toro is one that we use a lot, but it can pull from search data, it can pull from AI data, and we can see, the prominence of that 20 to 30-year-old female. We can create an AI search. The audience tool will then spit out what podcasts they're listening to, who are the key influence and stakeholders to them, what social media channels they use most, what search engines they use most, and how does that compare to the kind of average Joe UK average. So we can get really loads of data points to support that persona building, which again leads us to better outcomes ultimately for our clients. But it all boils down to intent. And that's what we need to be thinking about when we're optimizing for any channel across the board.
So this is the personalization is absolutely key, even more so in understanding, and that granular thinking and planning is even more important now with AI.
Yeah, definitely. And we can use AI on the other side, to help build out those personas. So feeding all the data points we're getting from our research, from our tools into AI, feeding, for example, whenever we're creating personas, we have a qualitative lens over the top of that. So that will be interviews, stakeholder workshops, audience interviews. We can feed all of that quantitative data, qualitative insight into AI, having our own agents and notebooks to ensure that the personas that we're creating are as fleshed out as possible. And then all of that information, you've got it contained in AI, that persona, you can test and learn your strategy against that, all of the other data. So it can all feed in, and really we have so much more of a established and dynamic way that we can use these personas now because of the use of AI, because of the
Yeah.
amount of data that we can put into it. We can be really directional when we're coming up with our strategy.
Brilliant. And Sean, I know you do a lot of work in the e-commerce space. Obviously, once you've converted leads into a customer, then it's about retention, isn't it? And that's absolutely critical. What can brands do to continue nurturing business and keep audiences coming back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an ever growing important kind of piece to be piece of the puzzle at the moment. I say lots of people will have experienced kind of ad costs going up, the effectiveness of those going down over the last 12 to 18 months. So yeah, using your own data and really maximizing that data is a really, really important piece. I think one of the first things to start with is just making sure all your data is connected up correctly. So looking at, so if we're talking e-com, looking at the platform that you're using as your store. So for example, if you're on Shopify, there's the ability to link directly into the various ad platforms, whether that's Google Ads, Meta, etc., and flow your customer and your audience data directly over from the store. So you don't have to do anything, and you've automated those segments. Likewise, when you look at things like email, not all email platforms are built the same. They're not all equal anymore. So we particularly favor a certain platform that has an on-site tag as well. So we're then using actual customer data, what they're interacting with, what they're doing, as well as the information we already know about them. So if they've ordered something in January, come back in February, start browsing a certain product, we're able to then trigger email flows off the back of that without having to do it manually, just because we know that they've looked at certain products, and then bringing in that product information automatically into those emails as well. So, you'll see it with Amazon all the time. You browse something and you get a load of recommendations afterwards. All those bits and pieces are there. And I think AI layered over the top of that is really helping at the moment, because you can then understand the semantics around the product, and it can offer things that would be useful to go with it. So, go back to our caravan example, because why not? If you bought the new one, you might want to buy a cover, you might want to buy an awning, all of those things that you probably would be interested in, but you won't necessarily be searching for at that point in time. But again, by layering over the AI over the top of those kind of foundational data points, you can start to be a little bit smarter about what you recommend and when and how. And of course, then if you're bidding for people again via paid media, having your own audience data in so that you have campaigns that's focused at retention, so getting people back again after they've already bought from you, separating that out from your new customer acquisition campaigns is a great way of ensuring that you're saving your spend and only spending on or spending highly on those new customers. Because as they'll all get into the mix, your overall ad cost raised goes up, but actually you're just bidding for people that potentially would have come back to you anyway. And by using your own data but just bidding on that separately, typically it will be cheaper, your conversion rate will be better. So it's worth separating them out.
Brilliant. Thank you. We're going to open to questions in a moment, so please start submitting them. And just one final question before we go on to those around measuring success. I think, Joe, if you could kick off with this, what's the best way to measure success? There'll be lots of people thinking, okay, I've got my comms program. I know I've got to consider exactly what what customers need in terms of developing the right content. How do we, in terms of measuring success and the effectiveness of your approach and messaging, has that changed at all? Are we still thinking it's very much the same as we've always sort of worked?
I think there's an element of both. So at Ambitious, we use the AMEC framework. It's global best practice for measuring PR and comms. It really focuses on, and again, this is why I don't think it has changed that much, because it's focusing on not just outcomes, but it's focusing the outtakes all the way to the actual impact of the comms that we're having, and drilling down basically into what our clients' key challenges are and then what the impact of solving those challenges. So sometimes that can be as simple as revenue growth or lead growth, and sometimes it can be as complicated as entry into a new market, for example. And ultimately, we just need to ladder everything up when it comes to the different channels. So whether that's PR, whether that's more digital activations, whether that's paid, it all needs to ladder up to that impact for the clients that we work with. The only thing to now consider with the change in customer journey is that there might be more inputs, and there might be different inputs. So, there might be different stages for the customer journey now. There might be different inputs such as AI search, which I know we've discussed a lot. But all of these really, in terms of a formula to getting to the root of effectiveness, it's still the same in terms of going through those different stages.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I can see a couple of questions coming through. So the first one I'm going to read out here. So media coverage and content, especially online, is known to be generated via AI, and sometimes it can also be seen as driving misinformation. Can AI recognize AI and make a distinction between what content is based on real expertise versus content that isn't? And how can this impact reputation and credibility? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Go on, Joe. Do you want to take it, or do you want me to go?
You go.
I was going to say, there's different elements to it, isn't there? Because there's lots of AI content online, but the content may be written by AI in terms of it's structured, some of the sentences and the way the words are formed together, but the actual underlying content is from an expert or professional in the first place. So, you might write a draft and then give it to AI to make it look better. For example, there's a difference in that versus the content that's, some people will just completely put out there as spam, essentially, to just let the AI go and create it all by itself without any fact checks. And then, yes, there is that. At what point do you get into an echo chamber of AIs referencing AI? Can it identify it? As far as we know, we've not been told by anybody that Google, Gemini, or ChatGPT can. However, I'm fairly certain that the companies behind it will have markup and tags to understand what they've generated themselves versus what they haven't. So, yeah, it's all down to how you use it, I would say.
All moving at pace. Joe?
Yeah, no, and I'd just say, obviously, journalists have less time, there's less money invested in the media. However, for those, top trade publications, national publications, yes, there's an influence of AI on reporters and what they're writing, but ultimately those, more reputable platforms are still going to be championing journalistic integrity and writing their own articles. And these are the links and the reputable sites that AI is pulling from. So yes, it's a danger to our industry to an extent, but ultimately it's not going to drive the best results. And, as we saw with Google algorithm updates back in the day affecting, people who are writing with AI, it's not going to have the same effect, and it's not going to be as good as proper comms.
Thank you. There was always going to be a question around ethics and trust. I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think that's obviously a big concern for a lot of people. So one of the questions, what are the key pitfalls that communications professionals should be aware of when using AI and ensuring we are adhering to appropriate ethical standards?
Yes. There's all sorts of wider ethical concerns with AIs. AI still hallucinates. There's the ideas of deep fakes. You're seeing an Instagram app now to play with their AI mode and create your own videos. There's obviously the sustainability concerns, data protection. When we're thinking about it from a comms perspective, though, and the work that we do, it's all about our own integrity and fact checking ourselves. And whenever we're doing insights for clients, we don't just take what AI said at face value. We check those sources. We ensure that we're cross-checking those sources and fact-checking the source of, the people who are writing them. And I think for us, it's all about having that integrity in ourselves to ensure that we're doing our own due diligence around the use of these tools. It's only going to become more complicated as more agentic AI systems come in that are semi-autonomous, and they're already using it in IT and the insurance industry to do tasks without much human intervention. That's going to become more commonplace across lots of different industries, including our own. But it's maintaining common sense and having a human lens on things to have those protections in place, and having AI policies internally, no matter how big your business is, to ensure that you're doing things the right way. And I think that's the key grounding that just needs to be remembered.
And that transparency, isn't it, with clients, I think we've realized is obviously absolutely critical as well. And as you said, Joe, human, AI, human, you're still going to need the input and the analysis and the thought process.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one thing sort of playing the game and trying to, show up for AI search. You might, optimize a press release before you send it out with AI search in mind. That's one thing, right? That's good practice now at this stage. But it's another thing, for example, I don't know, trying to influence AI search to discredit one of your competitors. There's a common sense element to it. And I think, having those best practices and working within the lines of what is ethical is often down to your own policies, and just keeping that front of hand.
I think we've probably got one more question. We might lead to two. But what are the strategies? What strategies work when you understand your audience, but they're really hard to engage with? So, for example, we've got one here around tradespeople, plumbers, electricians. So the business knows them, but finds it really hard to engage and reach them.
Do you want to go, Sean, or I can?
Go on, yeah, sure. So, the business knows them, but it's hard to reach. So when we're talking plumbers, electricians, etc., we're thinking that they're known, but customers find it, or that they find it difficult to get themselves out. Okay, yeah, I mean, a lot of that, the AI generation, I suppose, that this where we are at the moment offers a bit of a level playing field to a lot of those now. Whereas historically, yes, it's been difficult because if you're not ranking first, second, or third, and haven't been doing that for a long time, then your discoverability is somewhat limited. However, with also the changes and things that we've discussed so far, it offers almost a clean slate, because you're no longer competing to see who can have the most links, or that was what was traditionally done. It gives you that opportunity to now approach it in a new way and say, okay, how do we make sure that our website is structured really well? One of the most important things that we see day in, day out with particularly those kind of smaller businesses is their data and their reporting structure and setup. So if you're running paid ads, for example, across any platform, the data quality for what is a conversion, what is an action, etc., going back into platforms is absolutely vital now. They're all run on AI essentially based automated bidding strategies, and they feed off the data that they've been given. So if you're saying it's a conversion because somebody's visited a page, when quite clearly that means nothing to you as a business, that's the information that the ad platform's got, and so it's going to run away with that and try and optimize for the same thing. So it all starts, I would say, from structure of the site, making sure it's there, and all the things we talked about today, but also that data integrity, making sure that what you think of the conversion as a lead for you as a business is what's being told to the ad platforms or back into your own analytics, and is being optimized towards.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anything else to add there, Joe? Or
Yeah, I think for us, this is where the insights really comes into its own, in terms of understanding that audience. Obviously, different audiences have different needs, but really what we always come back to is really meeting them where they are. So, for example, for tradespeople and plumbers, they might be more receptive to more detail, factual content about the things they're interested in, rather than more fluffy brand-led content, for example. They might be more responsive to reputation signals such as like reviews, Google and Trustpilot, rather than I don't know, something else. So it's about really understanding that audience and taking a step back, again, going back to your persona work, going back to what data we can gather about the audience from online sources, and then building a strategy around that to meet any audience, no matter how kind of or nuanced.
And then just finally, there's a question around, I think it comes back to that content type again with the new AI answer engine. Is there a higher ranked content type between company sources such as blogs or on-site LinkedIn articles versus social posts, FAQs, or is it about a good balance of all of them and making sure you're really kind of answering the pain point and the questions that your customers are going to be asking?
I think, there's a balance. FAQs is an interesting point to pull up because they've really come back into prominence more recently, because ultimately you've got to try and think like AI. So what AI wants when it's crawling your website is a really quick answer to what could be quite a complex question. They want it contextualized quite simply so they can pull that answer and return it to their customer, which is the person searching. So things like FAQs can be really powerful in that sense. When it comes to the other sources, you've got to think as well, there needs to be a level of connection between all of them.
Yeah.
Again, that's compounding the interest from the AI search bot to say that, look, they know what they're talking about in the FAQ, but actually there's no other reference to that across any of their other comms. If we can compound that across different sources, that's going to make it more powerful.
Yeah.
So FAQ are more important than they were, but ultimately it's all still
All of it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid I think we're going to have to end the discussion webinar there. Sorry if we haven't got round to answering any of your questions, but you know exactly where we are. You'll have access to this webinar. And if you haven't made it, I hope you enjoy watching it at your leisure. And obviously, it's been great to host the session. So thank you to Joe and Sean for your expertise. And thank you to everyone for joining today. And see you soon.